I'm Jay Percy,
and welcome to the Afro Animist Podcast. We are two Abia women and animist conjurers exploring witchcraft, healing and psychedelics.
The Afro Animist Podcast explores the secular through the spiritual, discussing life experiences through a sacred lens.
Here you'll get to hear talk about philosophy, metaphysics, occultism, shamanism, culture, healing, nature, animism,
the arts, conspiracies, psychedelics and witchcraft. Nothing is off the table in these discussions, which aim to get to the heart of what it means to be spiritual and Afro-diasporic in an increasingly sterile, authoritarian and Eurocentric world.
As Afro-Caribbean millennial Londoners, we keep it real whilst exploring the biggest mysteries of our multiverse. Join us in holding this space to cry, laugh, debate, build community and tear down oppressive structures.
What do you think some people need to realise?
Oh,
what do you think some people need to realise?
No, before that, because I realised you started recording and I got red light syndrome and I forgot what we were talking about.
Go to therapy. Go to therapy.
Yeah, I think we have to realise this. Like there are many tools, and they don't all just look like, waving some sage about and praying about it. Like therapy is an amazing tool to use for this stuff.
Yeah, don't just wave sage. Anyway, what are we talking about? Let's go. Hello. Beautiful, beautiful being of the multiverse, and welcome to today's episode of the Afro Animist Podcast. You are here with me, Jay Percy, the artist.
And me, Nikki, or Nicola, sorry, who am I? Nicola.
Who are
Nikki.
you?
You can call me
Nikki, Nicola.
Either or.
And what are we talking about today, Nicola? Nikki?
We are talking about generational curses. And I'm already confused.
Yeah.
Intergenerational curses.
Intergenerational curses.
There's a lot to talk about in this subject. Faux show.
I can't believe we've waited this many episodes to finally talk about this one.
I know. And I feel like we've probably touched on it in a few of the earlier episodes.
Yeah. Just
when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, I feel like I need to find some different stories to tell, because actually maybe I've told my those stories.
You haven't told them all. There is no way you've given away like a lifetime of stories on what has it been, 15 episodes of episodes?
50. Well, I hope so. Yeah, I hope I've got more than 15 hours of life stories to share.
We had hope. We would hope. But yeah, this is quite it's a serious topic, but you know us by now. We're not going to make this the most solemn, dull thing in the world. We're going to put our witchy spin on it. So we're going to be talking about what intergenerational trauma is, what it feels like, what it looks like. Maybe your bloodline is cursed, who knows? But we'll definitely be leaving this episode with some tips on how to break these intergenerational curses. Nicola, what is an intergenerational curse? Or what is intergenerational trauma?
You always make me do this, like I'm the one with the explanations when you're actually one that's really good with the words. So a generational curse would be a negative karma or curse, hex, something like that that's passed down through the generations of your family. It doesn't have to be like somebody's turned around and gone, hey, I'm cursing you and
you and your firstborn.
I curse you. Although that can work.
Yeah.
We're also talking about like the literal effect, I think, of being born into the families that you're born into. And I think it's going to be really interesting with the name, because I sometimes struggle with the word curse and hex and things like that, because I think it can kind of limit our understanding on what that is. Like literally
it puts it in a box. If you say it's a curse or a hex, it's automatically witchy. It's automatically something that comes out of Harry Potter.
Exactly.
I think we maybe slightly mean that, but we're also talking about the mental as well as the spiritual, because they're
exactly
linked.
So it can also they're completely linked, and it can also be something that has been passed down. Like sometimes I think about this generational curses kind of like genetic imprinting, so if your family has experienced some kind of big thing, like some kind of trauma, like we might as well go straight in there and say like slavery, then that learning that your family has had for generations, for decades, or maybe even hundreds of years, is then kind of like a way that God, what's the way? The DNA of your family has kind of evolved to be able to deal with that, and that's kind of I feel like nowadays we can see those effects in the way that people behave, and sometimes we feel like it doesn't really make sense for people to behave like that, but actually it's an echo of something that their forefathers experienced, and they adjusted to behave like that to survive. So yeah, there's so many layers and levels.
And you say you're not the wordsmith, but I think this echo is the best way. I couldn't have explained it like that. It is an echo from times gone by, right? And a long time ago, it would have been easy to just say, oh, but that happened, hundreds of years ago. It didn't happen to you. It happened to your great grandparent. So you just need to get on with it. But we now actually have science validating this in terms of epigenetic trauma. So epigenetic trauma is trauma that passes on between generations. It basically codes its way into our DNA. I guess as a survival mechanism, if our ancestors fell out of a tree, or injured themselves, they would have had to have learned that they shouldn't do this thing because it will cause death or injury. So in the next generation, there's going to be this sort of like inbuilt awareness, or generations after generations inbuilt awareness of not to do certain things, and then that becomes a reflex, and that becomes a part of our being, who we are. So if you then have 400 years of enslavement of the African diaspora, it's only really been in the last 150 years that these things chattel slavery wasn't happening. We still have modern day slavery. We can't say there's no slavery. There's still modern day slavery. But it's not really a long passage of time. My grandmother, her grandmother was enslaved. So the parenting techniques that my grandmother's grandmother would have had, that would have been aligned with keeping her child and her safe away from, slave master beating, or like forcing young women into sexual relationships much before their time, that would have been handed down. So we start to see things in the African diasporic community, like calling little girls fast, or I saw some video the other day where some guy's taking the weave out of a girl's head who's under 15, who decided to get weave, and he was obviously unhappy at his daughter getting weave because she's looking too old, girls are looking too fast. But this idea of worrying about children in our community being too fast is because back in the slave trade, if a girl, as soon as a girl would have menstruated, even if she was 11 years old, she would be used, she would have been raped and bred. These words are horrible. That's what would have happened to her. So her being too developed before her time would have actually led to harm. So there would have been a community probably drive to hide the fact that this young girl is going into womanhood. So now you're seeing this as these traumas, the way you see some people treat their kids and say, oh, you can't have these hairstyles, or you can't wear those clothes, you're growing up too fast. And while it seems like a good parenting technique, it's actually rooted in trauma. And there's a great sociologist on this, Dr. Joy DeGruy, Grui, I don't know how to spell her name, and she wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and it talks about the legacy of enslavement on the DNA of the Afro diaspora. And that's just one of the examples. There are several more. And after I feel like I've been going on a sermon, but after a long amount of time, this is going to have an effect down the bloodline. How many generations is it going to have an effect? Until you intervene and say, do you know what? These are the things that happened in my community. I need to do the work in order to make sure that I'm not perpetuating certain behaviours. This isn't just the Afro diasporic community. I can point to the Jewish community having gone through the Holocaust. Prior to that, we can point to the Irish community who was starved out by British. They've actually got higher incidence of Alzheimer's in their communities because of what the British did during the Irish potato famine. So when we can start to point to these things epigenetically, we can see scientifically it isn't just some airy-fairy thing. It's something spirituality. Once again, on this show, you're not hearing it here first, but spirituality has been going on about these things for centuries. But it takes these new validation methods in order to show that they're actually the truth, right? But it is the truth.
Wow, babe. You just bring so many facts. Like, that's deep. I've never thought about that aspect of it before. Like, for example, little girls and in the community, how many
times when you've been told as a kid, as soon as you got boobs, you can't wear that, you're looking too fast, or you're being too fast, especially in the Caribbean community.
Yeah.
And
it just makes me think as well, just how, like, I was actually talking with someone about this the other day, like how Black children are still seen. It's almost like, I don't know what this is. It's maybe again, it's the standard of what the West tells you is, for example, what a child should look like. Because I feel like I see so often that young Black boys and Black girls will be seen as older than they are and treated as older than they are, especially in the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not understood. And so it's just kind of brought like this kind of
layer
flow of thoughts from what you've just said. Yeah, because that still actually is going on. Actually, like that girl, oh my gosh, that girl who was a 15-year-old girl, Black girl, a few weeks ago, who was strip searched while she was on her period at school because her teacher thought that she smelled weed, so they called the fucking police, strip searched this girl while she's on her period down to her, oh my god. And it's just, and I just sat there thinking that I thought about it, you know, like how Black children all the time are treated like they're adults way before they're adults. They're looked at like they're adults way before they're adults. And how much that is part of the biggest fuckery of not actually being given the opportunities that we deserve. But
no,
wow,
it's absolutely so. You know, having to contend with being adultified, while at the same time having these ancestral fears in your parents' mind, saying, "Well, you can't look older. Don't look too fast," because, you know, back then, even now, they're still going to treat you in a certain way because you've been adultified, but maybe that's not particularly articulated by a lot of parents. So you'll have a lot of people who would have gone through their lives feeling that my mum wouldn't let me get my hair done like this, or, you know, she perhaps suppressed my sexuality in a way because of something that she doesn't even understand herself, you know?
Yeah. I mean, even my mum, like, so I've got a sister who's 15 and a half years younger than me. And when she was growing up, I was like so firm with my mum, like, you need to let her do things. Like, you need to let her go and stay at her friends' houses. You need to let her kind of go out and hang out with people, because I was not allowed to do that. Like, I wasn't allowed. It was like my mum was obsessed. Sorry, mummy, but she was obsessed with the potential of me getting raped.
Yeah,
like that was literally my obsession.
As soon as was actually, maybe it was the 90s thing.
Maybe it's the 90s flex, but like it was like if I had a friend and they had a big brother or they had a father, which, let's be honest, most people do, I wasn't allowed to go to their house. I literally didn't stay at another person's house apart from like my cousin's houses until I was 15 years old.
Wow.
Like, I was not allowed, like, but I was given also big bits of responsibility because I was the oldest in my family, so I had a lot of looking after the other children.
Oldest emotional support daughter.
Exactly. But then I wasn't allowed to. I remember being like 14, 15 and having like a friend whose mum drove, and she was an only child, and so she had like this massive level of freedom, and I was just put my foot down and was like, no, I'm gonna start going out and doing things with my friend. Her mum's gonna come and pick us up, it's cool. And I just like literally just, that was it. I was gone. But it was, it's just like it's a crazy thing to think about, actually, like why just how much that pressure also was put on me as a child, as a little girl, that I had to be careful, which is obviously, you know, one of the fucking big problems in the world right now, but like, you know, that I have to be careful. And just getting older and thinking back on those kind of things, it's so layered.
It really is.
Wow. I feel like I need some space to think now. You've actually blown my mind in the first 10 minutes.
Right, we can go home. That's this week's episode.
Okay, we're done. Just think about what Jay said. That's all you need.
we like to keep it spiritual here on this show, right? So I always think it's interesting how this has developed mentally over time. So each generation will have something traumatic happen to them, and then they'll pass it on to the next generation in some way, somehow, whether it be through the actual physical parenting or whether it be through your genes, and certain genes will turn on and off as a result of what has been experienced in your ancestral past, as well as your current experiences in the world. You know, in terms of spirituality, I feel like it passes on the same. So I guess when we're talking about intergenerational curses in this episode, I kind of want to get to the heart of this sort of like, not just mental lineage of passing down trauma, but this spiritual trauma that has been passed down from generation to generation. Do you feel like there's anything perhaps in your life that has felt like it's looming over your head, and perhaps at some point in your life you thought, why is this a familial curse of some reason?
Okay, guys. We get to know Nikki. You think you knew me already. But yes.
Yeah.
Like, to the extent where I don't even really know if I want to talk about it. I'm like, wow, this is going out on the internet. And yeah, I mean, lots of times in my life, actually, because, like I said before, I suffer with anxiety and depression. That's been something that has been a massive life challenge since I was 12, 13 years old. And with that, for me, comes a lot of feelings of being stuck. And there are definitely things in my life that have happened. Like, I could definitely put my therapist hat on and say, okay, this triggered that and that triggered that and blah, 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 blah. But there's also something bigger. Like, when I look at if I step back and I look at the whole generation of my family, and then I look at the generation above us, and I look at the women and I look at the men, and I see these like proper, I just see the story continuing to play out over and over and over and over again. Like, so for example, in my family, my mum's parents, for example, they got a divorce, and it was actually really not very nice, because he had decided, they'd come over from Jamaica, and decided pretty much within a few years that he was going to marry this other woman. But he stayed with my grandmother until the youngest child was 18. The day she turned 18, he left and he went back to Jamaica with this other woman. And so there's this split, and there's a split that happened, like, and it happened to her mum as well. So my great grandmother also, my great grandfather, should we say, came over to this country, left my great grandmother. Then his children came over to this country. All their relationships broke up. Like, and it's just this constant like theme. And not only that they break up, but very specifically that the men leave the women, that they leave the women in a very specific way, very traumatic way. And then the women are left to do everything. And I feel like this is quite a Jamaican story anyway. Like, they've got enough kids from enough places, the cousins from wherever, like everyone being flown over, like to be looked after by the woman who's literally been left there. You know, and so I then see this where there's this epic strength of the women in my family, but also like this big line of like no confidence at all, and like no self-belief, no belief in like their worth. And I feel like that, you know, and that's really, really clear. And that's something that I've had to battle with, even in my relationships, and the way that the people that I've chosen to be with, and the way I've chosen to behave in those relationships, the way they've gone on, like, there's definitely something there. It's been so crazy that it's just all reflections of what's happened for generations. Even in regards to, like, there's so many levels of it in my family. For work, I've always thought, you know, what is it to move country? You know, obviously have Jamaican heritage, I also have English heritage, but I was born in this country, so the reality is I don't know what it's like to live anywhere else.
There, like, people don't understand that immigrating can be a trauma in itself. Like, moving to a whole new environment where your body isn't acclimatized to the temperature, the weather. You've got the physical side of it, the people. You're having to relearn a new culture. Perhaps you're having to relearn a new language, or even if you do speak English, you're having to pay special attention to understand that specific dialect. it's a whole package of stuff to get over in itself.
Exactly. And so, you know, so I've thought about that before, and I've thought about that being part of the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like how hard that is to do. As much as I want to go and live here and live there, that would be completely by choice. I'd be like, no, I just want to go and experience that land. And that's a gift that my grandparents have given me by coming here. Do you know what I mean? But for them, it was, well, we need some work.
Yeah.
We want to be able to give our children a better life because, you know, maybe there isn't the opportunities in this country, or at least we're told there's not the opportunities in this country, whatever the reality of that is.
Yeah.
So then they come over, but then you're right. You're in a different climate. Like, babe, I can't deal with winter. And I've spent every freaking winter in this country since I was born.
If you ever meet me in the winter, you'll be like, I can't believe she was like that. Like, you never meet your heroes, right? I will just talk about how cold it is. That's all I talk about in the winter.
If you meet J or I in the winter, then you're not actually really meeting J or I. You're just meeting the shell that is just keeping breathing until the sun comes back.
I'm human mummification in the winter. I do not exist.
Exactly.
It doesn't happen.
That's the way it has to be. You know, even because my granny, I used to think this was hilarious, but she used to always say, like, it's so strange for me having Christmas inside and it's cold. We used to have the Christmas tree out on the deck and we'd eat our Christmas dinner from the barbecue. And I'm just like,
shut the front door.
That is the craziest fucking thing. It should snow at Christmas. Like, but for her, even, you know, that, and we think about all of these things, our cultural holidays or our country's holidays and all of these kind of things, and how much they affect the flow of our lives every single year. If those things change, then it can be a trauma, and there is a massive adjustment that needs to be made. Not only that, but they moved over here in a time when, you know, all black people were put in the same place. All the black people went to fucking Peckham or Notting Hill or Birmingham or like,
Leicester.
You know, you're thrown into this community, but you're still massively judged and hated. I feel like that's why all of my aunts and uncles, for example, they're all very shy people. They're all very respectful people, and I feel like they fucking had to be because they were living in Peckham in the 60s. Like, there were two ways you could be. You could be an activist, or you could fucking assimilate and behave yourself, and they behaved themselves. Also, what then does that do to you?
It makes you complacent.
If you come from these people,
and then you breed a line of people. I'm not complacent. You'd be sort of like, you are exactly who they want you to be.
Exactly.
You're not,
and it's the safest way, and you can't blame anyone because it's the fucking safest way to be. What you can do. Do you know what I mean? It's such a hard thing. But then on top of that, so if we, you know, there's all those layers that we can strip away from that. But then on top of that, I have also received messages that say that my family is cursed. So in a much more spiritual way. So when I was doing a lot of my ceremonial medicine work, I immediately, what started to come up for me was the family stuff, which I think makes complete and utter sense, because obviously this is where our first lessons are. This is where our first healing needs to really be, is with the family. Like, so that stuff started to come up. I started to really look at it, but then I remember I was kind of in between doing things, and I had this dream one night. So just randomly had this dream. And it was, to me, I knew what was happening in the dream straight away. It was, I don't know if you get this, but I have my dreams are different. So dreams that are visions or prophetic are different. I immediately know. It's like I'm lucid, but it's not lucidity in the same way, like as if you're in your dream world and you become lucid. So I immediately know. I remember these things like fucking by the detail. Like, I'm not going to wake up and forget it. So I had this dream that, and there was an ancestor who I saw as an ancestor. She looked like she was probably around 150, 200 years ago, something like that. The kind of smock she was wearing. We were in Jamaica. She looked like one of my cousins, like properly, like like her face almost. It was her. And I knew that she was an ancestor of mine. And she came to me and she was speaking to me in patois, and I could not understand a word. I just was like, what are you saying? Sorry, what? And so then she wrote me a letter, and this letter was also written in patois. It's these crazy details that you remember. But this letter was written in patois, but I could understand the letter because I was reading it, and she basically told me that the family was cursed, and they'd been cursed at her time.
Wow.
And it was on the mother line. And she said to me, and it was so fucking like, it was such a hard thing to hear from the spirits, shall we say, because my grandmother died when she was 63. I lived with her, like me, my mum and my brother, and we all lived together. And my mum worked full time, like she worked like 6 days a week. So my grandmother really raised me for the first 10 years of my life. When she died, it was devastating. As in, like, I'm still not over it. I mean, you never do, but like and it was completely random and out of the blue. Like, she'd broken her little toe, and then the doctors had put a cast on her from her ankle to her knee, didn't cover her foot. She had deep vein thrombosis. She then developed a blood clot, and the cast that she shouldn't have had on pushed the blood clot to her lung, and it suffocated her. So she just went to stay at my auntie's house, literally, and I'm with her every single day. She went to stay at my auntie's house for 2 days, and she died there. And it was like she'd just gone away for a trip. 63 years old, perfectly fine, still the woman of the house, doing absolutely everything for everyone, and she died. She dreamed, though, the night before she died that my grandfather came to get her, and she told my aunt, she said, like, your dad came to me in a dream last night and told me that he was coming to take me and it would be okay. I'm gonna die, basically. And my aunt was like, don't be crazy. And then she died.
Wow.
And so that was a massive shock for the family. Also, because all of my aunts and uncles, they were all at my age now. They were in their like early to mid 30s. So it's a fucking hard time to lose your mum, and especially like just kind of randomly like that. And obviously, because this is a mistake that was made by the caregivers to her, so it felt really fucking bad. But this dream, so this ancestor in this dream, she said to me, she should not have died like that. She went too early to her grave because of this curse, basically. And that to me was like that. I still struggle. Like, I'm telling you all now, I don't tell many people that, because I struggle with that, in the sense of like, I don't just like to just grab explanations for things to make me feel better, if that makes sense. And I don't want it to ever be that. But when I received that message, it made so much fucking sense. I can't even, like, it just made so much sense. I was like, okay. And then it was just, and then the next day I went to a ceremony and had an even deeper experience with it, because obviously that's what I was focusing on. I was like, I need to find out about this fucking curse, boy. Like, tell me about this curse. And I then understood about the nature of the curse. Now, it was a crazy experience, because basically I understood that it was a cyclic curse. And I don't know if this makes sense to anybody, because I've never researched it. This is all just stuff that I have experienced, and I have gleaned what makes sense from it. So I asked about the nature of this curse. I asked her, what is the nature of this curse? Like, that is on my motherline of the family. Is it real? Is it there? And then she showed me a really specific imagery. So I don't know, it could have been hours ceremony. I was doing the same thing in my brain. I opened a door. I went into a hallway, and then it was like, one of those dream hallways with doors all along, and then a door at the end of the hallway.
Yeah.
So I then walked down.
Why are they all like that?
No, fucking. It really gives you what you need. Yeah. So I walked down this hallway, and I'm going, okay, what is this curse? I walk down this hallway, I open the door, I walk through the door, and I'm in the exact same hallway again. And I'm like, I'm in the same hallway that I was just in. Okay, let me just walk down it. So I walk to the end of the hallway, I open the door. By the time I get to that door, I forget that I've actually just come out of that hallway. I open the door, I'm in the same hallway. And I go through the door, and I'm like, shit, I was just in this hallway. Let me go to the end. And I did that over and over. I can't, like, literally.
That sounds horrible.
It was horrible. And it took me ages to realize, because there was only certain moments of it, of walking through that curse, where I was actually aware that I was walking through the curse. So this gave me like this deep understanding, right, of this curse being cyclical. So it goes round and round and round and round, no end to it. And there's moments where you could notice what's happening, but actually, like many things in life, it's much easier to just kind of go along with it and still just try and do the same thing. So for me, that kind of was a massive lesson. Like, I see it in the family, I see it in the way the relationships happen, I see it in the way that people pass over. I see it constantly. Do you think you were being told
to stop going through the same doors, to stop essentially picking the same routes?
100%. I think it was literally showing me that, like, this is cyclical. If you don't become aware of this, then you will keep going, and then your children will keep going, and their children will keep going. One of you has to fucking break this cycle. One of you has to become aware before you get past the halfway point of that hallway, that you are in a cycle, you know. I don't know if that makes sense. For me, it's so incredibly profound.
Yeah, I'm
like,
kind of stunned
and
silence with this thing. I'm trying to figure out, what does it mean?
it's the nature of these things, you know. So with a lot of my teachings, it's a 7-generation thing.
Yeah.
So I know this is like an Indigenous American thing that is believed a lot. I'm not sure about the African deer spirit religions, like how much that is a thing, but this is a 7-year thing. So every person that is born is the 7th of the previous 7 generations and the first of the next 7.
Yeah.
Every person that is born is the point of the arrow of that generation. So they then have a choice to break the cycle or not. If they break that cycle, they heal what's happened for the last 7 generations. They also clear the path for the next 7 to come through and actually live their own lives without the shit that your ancestors have given to you.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a really beautiful thing, because whether or not you're spiritual, it's pretty standard to look back on a family and see actually very similar journeys, because these are the people that you're learning from.
Yeah.
And just on a basic level, it's just simple like that. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and that, such a beautiful it must have been beautiful at the time, but this idea of going through a hallway, going through the same doors and ending up at the same place. It's like you're being told, don't go through the same doors. You need to literally find a way to make your own path. And I feel
100%.
that feels something true to me, because I can see where the curses are in my family. I come from currently 2 generations of single mothers, and my grandmother was a single mother, my mother's a single mother, my grandmother's mother, even though she wasn't a single, she was like married, her husband, I think they were very focused on the business as opposed to particularly, I know they were very much into their family, but they were very focused on the business. So even though they were together, I don't feel they were together. There was a lot of help looking after the children. So there was no active like help from the parents to my grandmother. Like my grandmother, she wasn't raised by her mother. She was raised by her sister. So there you already have this breaking of, not being mothered, and then it sort of being really heavy on the shoulders of my grandmother and my mother, who all they're having to do is mother, and that is a stressful thing for them because there's literally no support in place. On my dad's side of the family, I felt it was really, really sad. My aunt had told me that, I think it's one of my great grandfathers, he was a Swedish man and had a baby with a Scottish woman, like my great great grandmother, and somehow he was a fisherman, so somehow he ended up not coming home one day, and really that mother had just thought, oh, he'd run out on me and left me with a baby. So she had grown up sort of with this hate in her heart, being left as a single mother, when in reality this man had died somewhere. There was no way of getting that communication across in that time. So this sort of like single mother rhetoric comes up a lot on both sides of my family. Like, it's definitely a curse that I feel the weight of. I feel the weight of, because I've seen how stressed it can make people, being the only one, shouldering the full responsibility. And I'm already, the anxiety, the depression, it's a daily battle to keep those off. So then for me, for the longest time, one of my biggest fears, it wasn't spiders, it wasn't water, it wasn't heights, it was like being a single mother. And if people ask me, it would be, being a single mother is my biggest fear. So it's something I've avoided all of my my life up until this point. I feel like there's a lot of work I'm having to do around that. But it's easier said than done, right? Because it's not just saying, right, I'm going to get rid of my fear of being a single mother, because then you end up bathing in the fear somehow, and then you end up the self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm kind of having to tell myself, right, what qualities do I need to put in place to be able to navigate a relationship, which, let's be honest, relationships when you've been with someone for a long time can be really challenging at points, and it's so easy to walk away. And I'm not talking about people who are in abusive situations. That's a completely different thing. If you're in an abusive situation, if you can see that you're in, try to get out. It goes without saying. It seems quite patronizing to say it, but relationships can be difficult. So I need to put in place qualities that I think will help me to avoid that situation instead of avoiding the situation, if that makes sense. I feel like I'd manifest the situation if I just said, my whole goal is to not be a single mother, because the universe just said, blah, 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 single mother. You know.
No, I totally get that, because I have a really similar thing as you. You recognise, especially being the eldest, you recognise how hard it is when that happens.
Oh my God.
And for me, it's been up until my kind of mid-20s, I was pretty sure I didn't want children because of that. And I have a similar thing to you, where I'm very aware of the manifestation of it. And actually, when I got with my current partner now, who is literally just like the sweetest, I'm fucking proud of myself that I managed to get this. Like, the way I've picked before, I'm like, well done, Nikki. He's such an amazing person, right? And I remember when we first got together, and I was speaking to my shamanic teacher about him and just saying how fearful I was, actually, because this is a man who he will be there, and he will support me 1000%, and he will look after me in all the ways that I need to if I want him to, and he's beautiful. And I really struggled with that. I really found it hard because it was not something I'd ever had before. And I remember talking to my teacher about it and saying to her, I can't rely on him. She was like, why can't you? I was like, it isn't safe to do, because like, if I have children and then we break up and then I've relied on him, and do you get what I mean? It's just like,
That's
I just
not even
can't.
your story. You made up a story that isn't even your story.
I made up a fucking story. And she was like, don't be ridiculous. She literally was just like, don't be ridiculous. She was like, don't be ridiculous. Like, this is a fucking gift. Just take the fucking gift. Maybe just realize that he may actually stick around.
Yeah.
She was saying to me, he may actually have children with you and then stick around. That is a mind-blowing fucking thing. And sometimes it's that. Do you know what I mean? And then I've thought about that a lot over the years. We've been together for like 7 years now. So it's not like it's a new thing anymore that he's so wonderful. But it's like, I've had to kind of think about that and go, well, do you know what? Actually, at the end of the day, relationships sometimes break up. And if we were to ever do that, have children and then break up, it would be for a really fucking good reason. 100%. It would be for the best reason. It would probably be for the children over anything. So, and if that was to happen, then that is just what would happen, and we would figure it out, and I have this faith just in him as a person, that we would be able to do that together if that was, the thing that happened. And sometimes I feel like that's also the lesson. It's kind of going, okay, well, this thing has been scary and it's been so destructive in the ways that I've witnessed it, but actually, if I was to have that experience,
you could reconfigure it to your will.
Exactly.
You could find a way to make it work for you and get over the stresses and, well, work through the stresses. It won't necessarily be the experience that your mother or even her mother had. It different. Because it's you. You're not there.
I'm not going to do things the same as anyone else. You fucking can. Nah, bro.
No, but we have to
build a whole new pile of shit.
We have to remind ourselves this with generational curses. Even if you can see a curse, like my mum is convinced that there is a family hex. She'll say there's been a family hex. I feel cursed. And I guess I'd say to anyone who feels that way, if you feel cursed, then sit down with that notion and write it out. What do you feel is cursed? What behaviors are you contributing towards enduring this curse? Because we're going to talk about toxic positivity in the next episode. So bear with me on this. But there's a lot of situations in your life where bad things have happened, and had you been able to control your emotions or react differently at the time, it could have gone down a different path. That's not to victim blame. It's not to say that the aggressor wouldn't have always been the aggressor. You would have just had the tools behind you to know how to deal with the situation. You'd be a whole different timeline. And it's about that, sitting down with your curse, like, what is this curse? How How does it affect me? What have I done to contribute towards it? Like, what have I done in the moment to aggravate the situation? Or like, I didn't set a fucking boundary. I let them walk over me. I went into my shell then where I should have been puffing out my chest. And like I said, we're going to be doing a whole other episode on toxic positivity, because that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about love and lighting your way out of bullshit. I'm talking about, I guess, shadow working your way out of stuff. And then move from that place. If you know that in your family line, I mean, this has come up a lot because it's probably the closest thing to us that we feel is entwined in this curse. But if you feel like people in your family have had terrible relationships and marriages, maybe try seeking out the theme. Why did these people have terrible relationships? You know, what was it in their childhoods that gave them a greater propensity for acting out in a certain way in a relationship? And then look at that behavior and say, what can I do to counteract against that? Because in doing so, you'll be able to move your lineage on just a little bit further. And it really does take being honest with yourself, and it really does take a moment to step out of seeing yourself as the center of this story. Because, you know, sometimes bad things aren't happening to you, they're happening around you, and it just feels like they're happening to you. That's one of the biggest lessons that I think I've learned in my life.
Yes. God, she's coming out with all the good advice this week, guys.
I've got some other advice. 10 episodes on I could do a course on intergenerational curses.
Okay, so everyone,
this
just
Friday.
being aware that within the next year, Jay's releasing a course about this, and we might even do a certificate, because it doesn't mean shit if we don't have a certificate, does it?
Certificate at the end of the course. I think if we were able to do a course, we'd have a certificate.
Yeah, I want to give people, like, really, we do it for the certificate.
Were you about to talk about your certificates? We're going on a tangent, and we're unashamedly going on a tangent about her certificates.
I have a lot of certificates.
Yeah.
I'm proud of my certificates. I think they're helping me break my curses. My curses. Oh my God, that's lit. I do have like a cool little tip thing.
Yeah.
So I follow this woman called Gina Spriggs, who I fucking love.
Yeah.
Like, she's a witch. Oh gosh, I don't know where in America she is, but she's somewhere in America, and she has a shop called Curio and Conjure, and I follow her on Instagram, and she does all of these amazing courses, and I definitely want to do every single one of her courses. You will too when I show you her, Jay. Yeah. But she sends like the most juicy emails, because she'll send you like tips, like proper like hoodoo tips in these emails. And I got one recently that was saying it was just to find out if you were cursed. So there's like these little things you can do. She sent you like a little technique to do. So if you think that you are maybe cursed, I haven't tried this yet, but I may actually go and try it today, and I'll pop it on Instagram for you guys. But like, she says, get a bowl of water and then drop 3 drops of olive oil in this bowl of water. And then if they clump together, then you're cursed. If they don't, then you're not cursed. Which I thought was really interesting, because it's, you know, where we can sit here talking about it and there's all these layers to it. Yeah. But sometimes I do have to go, come on, Nikki, is this even real? I'm going to do that later and see. She also, she sent me one, I mean, it wasn't personally to me, I'm on her mailing list, but she sent me one a little while ago, which was about curse removal, which I cannot find. But it was to do with eggs. Have you ever heard about like doing curse removal with
when you rub an egg all over your body, well, not like a raw, like an egg, a whole... How to explain a friggin' egg?
A whole egg.
An egg. Don't crack
the shell.
Uncracked. Rub it all over your body. Be careful not to break or crack it or anything. God, that was difficult. And then you basically the egg absorbs the energy on your body. You crack it into a glass of water, and depending on the way the egg falls, you can read the egg, absorb the curses, understand the curses. That's African diasporic. I know it's used in hoodoo traditions. I know in Ifa they do various rituals with egg. Sorry, I'm an Obia woman. I don't claim to know exactly the rituals of these other traditions. But
No,
look it up.
we know what we know.
Yeah.
And also, when it comes to these things, like, sometimes what someone knows is very different from what someone else knows or is going to do. And I just think, so be
all
fucking
of the different
open-minded, guys. If you're here,
timelines that were the result of the slave trade,
exactly,
you know, people from different tribes have had different ways of using these egg techniques. So
yeah. Exactly. And I have actually heard about I've heard about people doing it with wax, like beeswax as well.
Ah, beeswax.
So it's a similar kind of thing, I think, as it burns down or whatever. I don't know. I should be more. This is also the thing for somebody who has had this experience of literally being told by the spirits that you have curses. Like, I've really not done very much about it in that regard.
Yeah.
But this is because I also feel like, I don't know, you can give things power, and I just feel like this is such a kind of like tricky subject in the sense of what truly is a curse, like how does it work, but also like when it comes to manifestation and your own personal, like we spoke about in the last episode, manifestation, like your personal responsibility for it doesn't mean shit's your fault, but if you realize something, then maybe you have a responsibility for it. And just for me, sometimes I feel like half of my responsibility is my belief in the thing. So like I do really feel like if I don't really believe in something, like, and I mean not like I'm trying to ignore it, but as if I don't believe in the thing, then I
will it away
give it no
from
power.
You don't see it as a part of
Exactly.
your
And I feel like
reality.
there's something in that.
Yeah.
That's it. So even in understanding this curse now, I feel like I've learned loads of lessons from it, and actually it's beautiful in that way because it's given me a direction. If I hadn't seen that and understood that, then I wouldn't understand what the direction was and the ways to go. So I don't really think about my family being cursed anymore. 10 years ago, I was fucking all about that shit. I was like, oh my God, we're cursed. What am I going to do? Please, someone clear me. But now I don't even think about it like that. I just think about the person that I am aiming to be. Do you know what I mean? The person that I truly feel like I am, and that I want to evolve into my best self. And I
guess
just
this
try and
gets
create my
on to like,
actions
how do
towards
we
that.
break these curses?
Exactly. Over to you, Jay.
Well, no, just on the piggybacking of what you were saying, not giving it power. But you can't tell someone to not think about duck, right? Because now you're all thinking about a duck. What's probably better is for me to say, why don't you think about water? Because now your mind's on the water, and that's where we've shifted our attention to. So by focusing on making yourself a better person, and we have the word better, a better person, a better version of yourself, a more upgraded, a more grown version of yourself. That's how you can start to undo these curses. So for me, there's bamboo in my area, which is really great for hex breaking. So I tend to dry that out and use that as an incense to like clear the space before I then invite in the different energies. So the different energies I'm inviting in would be like patience, love, being able to. I like working with Sananga, right? Because what it teaches you to be able to do is deal with pain. And I think a lot of people don't realize is what they're calling their personality is just their terrible responses to handling conflict or pain. So working in Sananga for me, dropping the eye drops in my eyes, it burns. It just burns. But in lying there with the burn and breathing through it, my nervous system starts to understand that, you can work through pain. You don't have to react to the pain. You are choosing to react to the pain. And in choosing to react to the pain, you can choose not to react to the pain, or you can choose to control your reaction to the pain. That's been a big thing for me in terms of learning to, I know it doesn't seem linked, but it's very linked. If I'm having to deal with situations of high conflict, like recently I've been arranging a hen do for someone, and some of the people in the group have just been very discourteous. 10 years ago, I would have gone all East London on them. It would have been telling them about their race. It would have just been rude. It would have just been rude. It would have made the situation worse. But instead, and that would have been a part of a generational curse, because that's how a lot of people in my lineage act. If they're met with something that is anxiety stricken, they react in a certain way. And I used to react in that certain way. A part of me undoing that curse was not reacting in that same way. It was about finding a different way to react, a different way to be present in the moment. And just to say, I don't think so many of you understand that these generational curses, they will a lot of the time come to head in the situations where you feel the most stress, because what you haven't learned through the generations is how to effectively manage immediate stress in your vicinity. So yes, and anger. But I also kind of want to point to what should be an obvious one, or it seems like an obvious one. I know a lot of people don't have access to resources, but therapy. You can afford therapy. If you're going out and you're getting your nails done every week, and you're getting your hair done, or you're spending extra money on a book you shouldn't be adding to your collection because you haven't finished all of your other books as yet that week. Like, I'm talking to you, Nikki.
Aren't books therapy? I've read loads of books about therapy.
Doesn't that count? It doesn't count. It doesn't count to read about therapy. It doesn't count to watch therapy on the TV. You need to speak to a trained professional who is able to read you in a polite way, so that you can sit there and go, oh, is that what I was fucking doing to myself the whole time? Is that how I contributed to that situation the whole time? You need someone who is objective. Your friends aren't going to do that, so don't come at me with, but I've got friends. Your friends are not going to be that honest with you. Your friends also need to be able to keep a relationship with someone they care about. So they will be honest, and you will have honest friends, but they're never going to be able to do what a trained professional is able to do. And I say this having some friends who I will tell the most... I tell Nikki the weirdest shit. She will be honest with me, but there's always going to be a level, right? There's always going to be a level. Go to therapy. Go to therapy. Go to therapy before you choose to reproduce if you can. Go to therapy.
Just one more time. What therapy? Is it I don't think everyone understands. Oh, therapy. Okay.
Therapy.
Yeah.
On top of all of this burning of sage and burning of bamboo and using sananga and doing your rituals and releasing ceremonies, you need to be dealing with the mental at the same time, because the mental, you've got your mind, your body, and your spirit. You can't just focus on your spirit. Your mind and your body are going to fall down. You can't just focus on your mind. The other two are going to fight. You have to find a balance in the three.
100%. And and there were so many options as well, like, honestly. And I'm one of those people who knows I need therapy, and I do get therapy, and then I stop having therapy, and then I go, I could never afford therapy, let me buy a book. And then and then go back, crawling back to therapy. But it 100%. Even just on this level, like, where I feel like, for human beings, the most interesting thing for probably most human beings are human beings, and usually yourself, right? And that isn't a bad thing. It's just the truth. And to have a space where for 45 minutes, 50 minutes a week, for example, every couple of weeks, you can just talk to someone about yourself, I think is really healthy. And it gives you that space to do that in a way that you're right, you can't do with your friends. You can be honest with your friends 100%, but it also, like you're saying, there's usually a relationship that wants to be maintained there, but also are you going to be able to receive it? Like, my therapist could tell me something that if my friend told me, I would be like, bitch, fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, straight up.
Context.
I just I wouldn't be able to deal with it. I'd be like, how could you even think of me like that? But the therapist is like saying it, and I'm like, you're so right. I'm really going to work on that. You know, just on a level, it is good to do. There were so many things to do. I think a lot of the stuff that we talk about all comes back to just the same sense of kind of finding your personal power and having belief in yourself. I think all of this stuff comes back to that. Know thyself. Know thyself. Gosh. How well do we know ourselves? That's another. Let's not even start.
Do you have any?
I didn't even know my name when we started today.
I'm Nikki, Nicola, Nikki, Nikki, no, Nicola, Naomi.
Any of those work? No, not Naomi, and not Nicole. I tell you what, nobody call me Nicole. That pisses me off to the max. I've literally had people be like, yeah, but Nicole's basically Nicola. I'm like, no, it's not. It sounds completely different. There's a completely different letter at the end. Don't be so fucking rude.
Nicola. Okay, so I know how to wind you up now. Nicole.
I think you do actually have all of the... I've given you all of the information.
You've given me all the cheat codes. It's great. I can basically power her down whenever I want now. It's fabulous.
Babe, remember I'm from Peckham though, so be careful.
South versus East. Who's going to win? Let us know in the comments.
Not even a question. Why would she even ask that? This bitch don't know, bruv. I'm from Nam. You understand? Nam.
Yeah, I'm from the ends.
Anyway. Wusa.
Well,
sounds good.
I think now is as good a time as any to draw this to a close. I do want to kind of round this up with some signposting. If you're in the UK, I might have to live Google this in front of you. Mental Health Services USA, because in the UK you've got mind.co.uk. They can point you to local services that I think go as low as like £5 a session, depending on your income. I think my partner went with them, and it was like £35 a week. So that was pretty reasonable. I went private, which was, you know, doable for me at the time because of my income at the time, where I was paying like £60 a week. But yeah, it's Mind is a good service to help you find someone you can speak to locally. BetterHelp.com, it's online therapy. I've been hearing a lot of good things about that. I would also say, sorry, you might have to do a bit of editing here. Like, my mind has gone so blank. Go to the NHS.
I'm not editing anything.
She's not editing a thing. Go to the NHS and ask about talking therapies if you're in the UK, because of course it is free at point of use, because we pay our taxes here in the UK. And yeah, Google local services near you, because you may be able to find someone who can help you. If you specifically want to speak to a person of colour, baatn.co.uk, so the British African and Asian Therapy Network. Might have got that wrong, but BAATN, basically, they put you in touch with therapists who are people of colour, so be it from the Asian or African diaspora, who might be able to help you in the UK, especially if you're wanting to talk about racial trauma, which a lot of us do have in our lineages. That's a good one to go with. Do you have anything to say at all about that, Nicola?
No, I mean, what I will say is, if you can, if you do want therapy and you can go to one of the charities and get a reduced rate, then I would do it that way, just because if you do go via the NHS, as much as it is amazing we have that service, you might be waiting for a little while.
Yeah.
And then you don't have any choice in what kind of therapy you get. So, but yeah, I would really love, again, for this conversation just to be open. So let us know if you've had any experience in your lives, in your family, if you know anyone who feels like they've had a curse or a generational curse. Let us know what you also think about that. Do you even believe in that as a thing? Like, does that make sense for you now in this modern time as a thing? I mean, I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting conversation. I'd love to keep it open. And just also in regards to, like, I think we mentioned it a couple of times in this episode, but nothing can have control over you unless you allow it to. It's really, I think, one of the truths of our universe. And it's a really hard thing sometimes to recognize that. And it may take a lot of stepping up and a lot of strength and courage. But even if you are somebody who feels like you have some negative shit on your back, like, there are spaces where you are completely and utterly able to deal with that yourself. So have no fear, guys. We're here to chat with you as well. Drop into the DMs, get into the comments on Instagram. Yes, and I guess we will see you next week.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Afro Animist Podcast. I've been Jay Percy, the artist.
And I've been Nicola
Naomi.
Christine and Sharon.
Yeah. See you on the other side.
See you on the other side, guys.